Next is On the Road Tonight, with 25 hours to go until the polls close. Democrats are returning to their deep blue base in Boulder, trying to push turnout in a year where Democrats have a steep hill to climb against inflation and an unpopular president. A Republican candidate turns to stoking fears of election rigging, and she appears alongside an activist who has suggested her opponent should be killed. We're truth testing one of the most blatantly false claims we've seen this election season, and answering the questions that you've told us are keeping you from turning in your ballots. Let's hit the campaign trail in the closing hours on Next. 25 hours from now, it's all over but the crying, and perhaps the cries will be about election rigging. If you thought that Colorado had put those conspiracy theories behind us, today, Republican gubernatorial candidate Heidi Ganahl appeared with a parade of election deniers on a national television show where Ganahl said that Republicans need to win big to overwhelm the system. She'd previously said that Republicans need a red tsunami tomorrow so that there's no quote-unquote fixing it. And Ganahl recently told every county clerk just how she wants them to count the ballots and announce the results, suggesting that there would be questions about the integrity of Colorado's elections if those clerks don't follow her directions. Tonight, I'm joining you from a Republican Get Out the Vote rally involving Ganahl and other candidates in Aurora, and my colleague Marshall Zellinger is at a similar Democratic event up in Boulder.
Kyle, the Democrats campaigning for the state's top offices are not raising election rigging fears right now. They're campaigning in a college town in Boulder where they know their vote's probably going to go for them in a Democratic area. Over my shoulder, I think it's Congressman Joe Neguse. You can't see him because it's a skinny bar, and they're crowded in there without a riser because, you know, we're just crashing the party here. But as I say, they're in a place in Boulder where they know this is just preaching to the choir.
Marshall, one of the big challenges that Republicans face is how to turn President Biden's unpopularity in this state, despite the fact that he won Colorado, his current unpopularity in polling, is how to turn that into a bounce back from Republicans' weakest position in Colorado politics since before World War II. And today, in her closing arguments, gubernatorial candidate Heidi Ganahl is echoing some of her previous claims that Republicans need to win so big tomorrow that Democrats can't fix the election. Ganahl said that to supporters at an event last year, and today she appeared on Steve Bannon's War Room show where she made a similar suggestion that the Republican vote needs to overwhelm the system.
We need huge turnout tomorrow to win this. We're very tight in the polls. The media won't say that, but our internal polling shows us very close. So we need everyone to turn out big to overwhelm the system. Obviously, Colorado is where a lot of that.
Ganahl appeared on Bannon's show with a whole list of election deniers making similar claims. Immediately following Ganahl's appearance, conspiracy theorist Mike Lindell said that a Republican wave tomorrow was, quote, going to override those algorithms.
I gave you my 100% endorsement, and I think
Ganahl also appeared today on a show hosted by Joe Oltmann. He's the far-right political activist who has suggested that Ganahl's opponent, Democratic Governor Jared Polis, should be executed. Oltmann's calls for political violence against his enemies have been widely reported. Oltmann has called for the killing of U.S. senators, various Democrats, and journalists as well. A few weeks ago, the Ganahl campaign actually pulled out of a campaign event when they said that they learned that Oltmann was going to be involved in it. Ganahl is also raising questions at the last minute about how Colorado's votes will be counted. In a letter that her campaign sent to every county clerk in Colorado yesterday, she gave the clerks instructions on how she wants the ballots counted and the results reported. Goes without saying, county clerks do not take their marching orders from Heidi Ganahl or from any other candidate for office. So last night, Ganahl sent this letter to every county clerk in Colorado saying that she wants them to report the number of uncounted ballots remaining when counting shuts down on election night. Ganahl wrote, quote, "Nothing erodes confidence more than scores of unaccounted for ballots showing up in the days after the election." Ganahl acknowledged in this letter that, quote, "Colorado is not a state where that traditionally happens," and that's correct. She's referring to out-of-state conspiracy theories there. But she said that late arriving ballots create questions about the integrity of the process. Ganal also told every county clerk in Colorado that she wants a simultaneous hand count in addition to the machine count of ballots. That's a talking point that we've heard from a number of election deniers, like Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters, who said that there should have been a hand count of the 2020 presidential election, but did not do such a count when she was in charge of the clerk's office in Mesa County. We should mention, Peters just recently endorsed Ganal, said that she had spoken with her recently as well. A Ganal spokesperson said she did not seek Peters' endorsement. Ganal's Democratic opponent, Governor Polis, is scheduled to speak short time from now up in Boulder, where Marshall Zellinger is standing by with a truth test of one of the more blatant deceptions we've seen this election season. Marshall?
Kyle, just because 1.3 million people have already voted does not mean you get away with saying whatever you want without it being truth tested. I'll get to that ad in a moment. As you mentioned, we're here in Boulder, a Democratic event. What I've learned from people who go to Congress, like Senator Michael Bennet and Congressman Joe Neguse, there can be some filibustering, because when we started, Joe Neguse was on stage, and he's still on stage, but as you can hear perhaps with the speaker over my shoulder, they're now introducing Governor Jared Polis, as he is, perhaps him and Michael Bennet, the headliners of this event. While that's going on behind me, because we can't dip into that, let's get to that ad. As I mentioned, just because the election is tomorrow doesn't mean we stop truth testing, especially when claims that could be truthful in a way are manipulated into outright lies. Last week, Kyle called a political ad by Republican congressional candidate Barb Kirkmeyer a lie based on a statement she made about fentanyl. Well, the Colorado Republican Party took another swing at that topic and missed. This Colorado Republican Party ad portraying Democratic candidates as pro-fentanyl is anti-truth. Put another way, it's a freshly baked lie. Let's do this spelling bee style. Your word is pro. Can I get the definition, please? Pro means in favor of, supporting. Can you use it in a sentence? Well, the Colorado Republicans tried, but used it incorrectly. Democratic Attorney General Phil Weiser and Democratic 8th Congressional District candidate Yadira Caraveo are not in favor of or supporting fentanyl. As we have extensively covered, state lawmakers in 2019, including some Republicans, voted in favor of lessening the punishment for possession of up to 4 grams of fentanyl. Possession of that amount became a misdemeanor instead of a felony. That's not in favor of or supporting fentanyl. Caraveo in the state legislature was among the bipartisan group who voted to reduce the penalty of fentanyl, and then was part of the bipartisan group that voted this year to increase the penalty for 1 to 4 grams of fentanyl back to a felony, following the spike in fentanyl-related deaths. Weiser, as Attorney General, has no vote, but as I previously reported, his news releases during 2019 were silent during the effort to reduce the penalties. Then this year, he testified at the legislature in favor of increasing the penalties. The Colorado Republican Party could make a truthful claim about 2 Democratic candidates and their efforts to reduce fentanyl punishment in the past, but calling them pro-fentanyl is anti-true. It's a freshly baked lie. As you explained last week, Kyle, the difference between false and a lie is knowingly doing it. The Colorado Republican Party knows it is not true. The Colorado Republican Party knows the context I just provided you. They tried to get one past the goalie right before the election. We're not going to let that happen.
Kick save and a beauty by Marshall Zellinger. Marshall, thank you very much. We'll talk again in just a moment. You have just more than 24 hours left to get your ballot in the hands of election workers. Nothing in the mail at this point. It needs to go into a drop box, or you need to vote in person. If you're still holding on to your ballot because of some nagging question you have about a candidate's stance on an issue, or how a ballot measure would affect change in your city, town, or state, our next voter concierge service is back. We do this every election year. It's a 24-hour service. If you have a question that is keeping you from voting, email our team. Next@9news.com is the email address. Our team will work diligently tonight to get you factual information as soon as possible. But here's the deal. If we answer your question, you have to promise, you have to pinky swear that you are going to vote. That's the deal. We'll answer your question, do it in a hurry, if you promise to vote. Right now, as it stands, Colorado's voter turnout in this midterm election is lagging behind the 2018 midterm turnout in Colorado. And that's interesting, because that's not what we're seeing in other states. Take a look at what's going on in Georgia, what's happening in Wisconsin, what's happening in Nevada and Washington, and it's the opposite story, especially Georgia. Voting totals there are nearing the turnout in the 2020 presidential election. You never see that, a midterm at presidential turnout levels. Back here in Colorado, compared to our last midterm in 2018, Colorado Democrats hold a slim lead in returned ballots over Colorado Republicans. And they did not have that back in 2018. But the real story in ballot returns as of the day before election is the overwhelming advantage held by unaffiliated voters, who now make up 45% of registered voters in our state and 37% of returned ballots as of yesterday. Hey, quick word of thanks for you for the $13,000 that you raised to help out crime victims in our state. There's a fund organized by the Colorado Organization for Victims Advocates. Referrals come in from police and prosecutors of crime victims who need a little bit of financial help, and you've poured more than $13,000 into that fund, which has really been depleted by rising crime levels in Colorado. At last count, your next Word of Thanks campaigns have raised $9.7 million for nonprofits across Colorado. If you know of a wonderful nonprofit in the community that we haven't featured yet, shoot me an email, next@9news.com, and I'll be back on Wednesday with a fresh idea of how we can help. We're answering your ballot questions when we return on how many ballots one person can turn in during an election season, on retaining judges, and what to do if you've mixed up ballots in the wrong return envelopes. Next. Welcome back to Election Eve from the campaign trail on Next. I'm here at a Republican Get Out the Vote event in Aurora. Doors opened at 5:45, and the crowd has been, shall we say, slow arriving. Currently numbers in the dozens, but they were just blasting some Randy Houser, and he's my guy. Marshall Zellinger is up in Boulder County, where I'm not sure what kind of music the Democrats are playing, but we're still waiting for the governor to arrive at that event. Marshall and I have made our traditional Election Eve pledge to you. If you're still holding on to that ballot because you have some question that we have not answered for you, email us, next@9news.com, and our team, one-to-one, will answer your question if you promise to get your ballot in by tomorrow. I want to go through a couple of questions that have come in right now. Next viewer named Michael wondered about Colorado's law, which allows somebody to return up to 10 ballots. You'll hear Democrats criticize that, or Republicans criticize it rather, as ballot harvesting. You could drop off ballots for friends, family member, neighbors. Michael was wondering, is that 10 ballots total for the general election or 10 ballots at a time? It is 10 ballots per election, Michael. So if you're returning your own ballot, presumably, then you can return a ballot for 9 other people total.
No music being played here, Kyle. Raynette wants to know where she can go to find out information about the judges on her ballot, which is, by the way, if you haven't opened your ballot yet, you're going to be surprised when you see a lot of judges that you don't know how to vote for on your ballot. So it's a great question from Raynette. The State Commission on Judicial Performance is in charge of reviewing how each judge is doing the job. You can find their reviews on judicialperformance.colorado.gov.
A question came in from Mary Ellen. She says there are 4 voters in her household, and stuff kind of got scrambled up on the kitchen counter because she thinks that somebody signed somebody else's voter envelope, like filled out the ballot but then put it in somebody else's envelope, and she's wondering what happened to this point. Mary Ellen, you didn't say if you had mailed in the ballots or not. If you have sent them in already, there's a good chance your county clerk will ask you to cure the signature issue, fix the signature issue. If you haven't voted the ballots yet, if you haven't sent them in, you can get fresh ballots by contacting your county clerk. Based on the complexity of your situation, I'm going to suggest you reach out to your county clerk first thing in the morning and ask what to do. Keep those questions coming. As world leaders figure out how much of the cost of fighting climate change should fall to the U.S., experts at CU Boulder tell us who's really paying the bills. Next. There is a cost to climate change and its mitigation process, just like there would be a cost to allowing climate change to continue unabated. As world leaders gather in Egypt to talk about who should be footing the bill, Arnusha Roy talked to some CU Boulder professors about how much of it should be on us, the U.S.
The Front Range has one of the highest concentrations of researchers working on climate change, a result of decades of dedication to the issue dating back to the 1960s, when researchers were looking into the human's role in global warming, to today asking who bears the most responsibility. Take Fiji as an example, where an entire community moved because of rising sea levels, contaminating drinking water and crops with salt water. The government there is paying for it, but researchers are asking if that's the right answer. When it comes to global responsibility, the popular answer is countries emitting the most carbon today: China, U.S., the European Union, and India.
So the United States has more than 20% of the global total cumulative emissions, compared to China, of course, is now the biggest annual emitter, but only 11% cumulatively.
This is where CU Boulder professors say accumulation in history needs to be accounted for. For example, carbon dioxide lingers in the atmosphere for hundreds of years, which means emissions from the Industrial Revolution are as harmful today as carbon dioxide just released.
Industrialization is what allowed the global north, the developed countries, to become wealthy.
And while countries and companies are stepping up, it is nowhere near enough.
I think that the U.S., in terms of contributions to climate change mitigation and adaptation in relative terms, is one of the lowest.
A pledge by several countries to contribute $100 billion to mitigation and adaptation has fallen short.
It takes political will.
So some countries who have contributed the least to global warming also don't have the resources to adapt and figure out who is most vulnerable. That's where researchers like the professors we just heard from play a role in both understanding climate change impacts at home.
Transportation is a large part of our contributions to climate change.
And internationally, which is why you can find local researchers working in the polar regions to the tropics, and of course here in Colorado. For Next, I'm Anusha Roy.
Back at the Republican Get Out the Vote rally, looks like zero chance that Heidi Ganahl is going to speak by 6:30. Same goes for Governor Polis up in Boulder, so we'll hear from them at 9 and 10. When we return, Marshall and I share what we're watching tomorrow night. Our election night coverage begins at 7 p.m. tomorrow night on Channel 20 KTVD, streaming on 9 News Plus and 9news.com. Hope that you'll join Marshall and I for that. Marshall, what's one thing you're watching for tomorrow night?
Kyle, I'm going to be watching for the state Senate balance of power tomorrow. This is how the race starts. Half the seats are up for election, so there's 12 Democrats, 6 Republicans. It's a race to 18. Whoever gets to 18 controls the Senate. If it's Republicans, it'll be a split Senate and House.
I'll be watching for early margins in races in New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Virginia that could tell us if a red wave is coming. As CBS Newsman Bob Schieffer said, go vote. It'll make you feel big and strong.